And welcome to a Degenerate Friday edition of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForrest. Very happy to have you guys with us for what figures to be a terrific, always traditionally one of the great sporting weekends. A lot of action, many different things, a variety of different things to bet on over the weekend, including some obscure stuff which people are indulging in. As you have everything from the Indy 500, NHL, NBA playoffs, Major League Baseball to college women's and men's lacrosse being contested here, softball, all kinds of crazy things. Hopefully, you'll be successful with all of your wagers. But this comes out of the Jack Buck School of Broadcasting, the line that's out there for tonight's game between the New York Knicks and the Indiana Pacers. And this goes back to, of course, World Series play when Jack Buck bellowed out, "I can't believe what I just saw." That was a Kirk Gibson home run as he limped out onto the field there and was barely able to stand up. And he jacks one out of the park at a key point in the ball game. And Buck is going crazy. And it seems like the line makers and maybe even the bettors to a larger degree are viewing this Knicks Indiana game tonight in the very same vein. I can't believe what I just saw. Now, we know that the Pacers were playing into impossible odds when they were down 7+ points with 50 seconds to go. We gave you the stat that that outcome is always going in favor of the team that happens to be leading at that juncture, as you might imagine. And now the record since 1996 in spots in NBA games where teams are trailing by 7+ points with 50 seconds or less to go in a game stands at 4 wins for the team that was losing at the time and 1,702 losses. It almost never happens, but it's happened 3 times out of the 4 in this year's postseason with the Indiana Pacers. Now, Pacers were not playing a particularly good game against the New York Knicks. Nobody was really making much of a contribution beyond Tyrese Halliburton had a nice ball game all the way through, as you might expect. And Neesmith all of a sudden caught fire, but it wasn't until the fourth quarter when he knocked down 5 straight three-point shots. Knicks seemed to be handling the Indiana Pacers with relative ease. They're up 14 points inside of 3 minutes to go. And then things began to dissipate and fall apart, much to the shock of the New York fans, who had a radical reaction to what was going on. Online, I mean, you'll see a lot of cruel stuff online these days. Maybe your best bet is to just take your cell phone or whatever internet access you have, your laptop computer, and chuck it. Go to a pier somewhere and chuck it right in the ocean if you're going to be sensitive to such things, because the level of cruelty is often immense. We just had a story surface about the Boston's Red Sox pitcher, Liam Hendricks. Reliever had Tommy John surgery. He was an all-star caliber reliever, had a phenomenal record, great stats to go along with it, and missed last year, comes back this year. He's struggling a little bit. And what happens? Because he's posting through 11 innings, not exactly a giant sample size of play so far in 2025, he's having a bad year. You would have to say he's pitched 11 and a third innings, 5.56 earned run average. He's struck out 11, walked 6 in that span. And he's receiving death threats. That's what happens online. I mean, people can be especially cruel. But in this case, Knick fans themselves, you had a betting site, a big betting site in Europe, and Knick fans themselves making allusions that this is the toughest beat that's happened in New York since 9/11. You got to be kidding me. I mean, that's a bit over the top, is it not? Making 9/11 comparisons when you're talking about a basketball game reminds me of the Neil deGrasse and he was talking to us about Kyrie Irving. And he was saying, hey, I don't care about Kyrie Irving's theory about the Neil deGrasse Tyson. I don't care about his theory about the flat earth. We admire Kyrie Irving for being a basketball player, not necessarily for being a scientist or a world philosopher. And people online that are making these comparisons, including one Knick fan site, which was alluding to the 9/11 incident. I mean, you can't call it a tragedy, catastrophe, just an horrific episode in the history of the world. And they're making comparisons to the opening game loss against the Indiana Pacers. You're saying, well, what has gone wrong? with the thinking around the universe when maybe it is flat when you're seeing things like that being alluded to in relation to a basketball game. But all that being said, you have Indiana who just won this ball game, came back from the grave literally, and end up winning in overtime. And they're now getting 6 points in game two tonight against the New York Knicks, as if that never happened, as if that was an illusion, this comeback. Now, were they being handled so overwhelmingly so that you're thinking, oh, well, that was just an unusual circumstance and the Knicks deserve every right to be heavy, somewhat heavy favoritism for a team that just lost in that fashion. So I'm looking at that with great curiosity. It seems like the bookmakers, the line makers, are encouraging you to just unload on the Indiana Pacers. I'm not sure that I sense a blowout here. So while we've been wrong in the past in trying to assess, they did get blown out by Cleveland in a game we recommended you take the Pacers. Holy Rick Smits. I'm thinking that 6 points looks like a very, very generous offering tonight in the Knicks Pacers series. They may not win the ball game, but you would have to give them a very heavy shot of being within 6 points of the New York Knicks, who did not look like they were capable. If they couldn't shake them off in game number one, how capable are they of blowing out the Indiana Pacers in game number two tonight? We shall see, but very tempting to go ahead and take that 6 point offering with the New York Knicks playing the Pacers tonight and getting the 6 points with Indiana. The hockey action last night, wow. I mean, are we looking at a repeat performance? Our own hometown team, the Florida Panthers, looking every bit as sensational as they have at any time during the last three seasons when they've made the Stanley Cup Finals. Well, they haven't made it quite there yet, but they are well on their way. Appears to be a mismatch, doesn't it? This was like the USC student body right, student body left when they had O.J. Simpson, Ricky Bell, and Charles White carrying the rock for him, and the other team would be knocked 5 yards off the line of scrimmage by some animal like Anthony Munoz, and they just were in there with no chance whatsoever. It appears to be that blatant of a mismatch as you have now a 10-2 goal differential between the Florida Panthers and the Carolina Hurricanes. Hurricanes always one of those wise guy teams everybody alludes to and says, yeah, you better watch out for them. But if Rob Brindamore, the coach, didn't have the look of a loser after that first period where the Panthers only get 5 shots on goal and somehow beat Anderson 3 times, impressive forechecking that they were characteristic of in the last several seasons since Bill Zito took over as the general manager of the team and Paul Maurice using perfect formula, it seems, to take advantage of the aggressive talent that they have. This doesn't look like it's going far. The series returns back tomorrow night to South Florida, the Amerit Bank Center here in Sunrise, Florida. And it'll be just down the block, and I think you're going to be able to hear the cheering all over the universe as Carolina appears to be in a very, very impossible spot, down 2-0 after losing the first 2 at home to a surging Florida Panther team where you were still getting the benefit of the doubt in that series as well, and could have cashed a nice ticket on the Florida Panthers on the money line last night. Would have been worth giving up the goal and a half, and it doesn't seem like Carolina has any answer. Bobrovsky, the goaltender for the Florida Panthers, is sometimes so-so, but he's been stellar so far, pitches another shutout. And Carolina appears to be shell-shocked and badly overmatched so far in this series. Tonight, you have Edmonton and the Stars. Edmonton going to try and even things up. Looms is somewhat of a toss-up, even though the Stars pulled away in game number one. You're thinking Edmonton had won 8 out of 9. Maybe they were due to get tagged with loss. They were up 3-1 in the game and then gave up 5 unanswered. Are the Stars that good? Favored to win the Stanley Cup before the tournament got underway? We shall see, but it's a fairly even proposition according to the line makers tonight. I think both teams are minus 110, so can Edmonton bounce back in the series in one of the more difficult buildings to play in terms of decibel level of the crowd? Tough one. That's a tough call. I'm going to stay out of that game. I'm kind of pulling for Edmonton to be in a rematch with the Panthers for the Stanley Cup Championship. It was a great series last year when Edmonton rallied from 3-0 down, took it to a Game 7, and took it on the chin as the Panthers ended up winning their first Stanley Cup in the franchise's history after being in the finals only 2 previous times in 30-plus years. But this team appears to be built to do it again. They may be even better, faster, stronger than they were a year ago when they won the Cup, and they're starting to exhibit that type of superiority in the series against the Carolina Hurricanes. Can they handle either Dallas or Edmonton? Thinking yes at this stage, but we'll see who emerges from that one. Tough one tonight to predict, as you have the Edmonton Oilers and the Dallas Stars going at it in game number 2 in Dallas. A lot of other stuff going on over the weekend. You have the Indy 500. I'm not inclined to bet auto racing. I always wish that you could bet exactas in auto racing. That would make it a lot more fun. The French Open gets underway. That's a lot of fun if you're a tennis fan on the red clay, because the red clay is kind of like quicksand. It's the great equalizer for a lot of players. So you do find some upsets, and you have to take a careful look at who performs well on that surface. Usually it's some guy like Gustavo Kuerten, or yeah, the Spaniards are especially tough. We saw Alcaraz just win in Rome, so he may be a very difficult out in the tournament, but you can find some upsets there. So do your research, people. And especially in the early rounds, you might find something at a very, very attractive price that you can bank on as you research a little bit about who really does well on a red clay. We've had a couple of indicators with the tournaments in Barcelona and then in Rome, but the added pressure of the spectrum and the specter of being in the French Open at Roland Garros, it may change things a little bit in terms of the mindset of certain players, puts a little bit more pressure on the top players. So look for a couple of upsets in the early rounds there, and you might have a little bit of fun and be able to make a score before getting to the conclusion of the tournament. But bunch of other stuff, like I said, you got men's and women's lacrosse. I'm not inclined to dabble in that. Women's softball super regionals. We already had a massive upset, and then this was a good one in the international hockey venue. You had Denmark beating the Canadians. I'm not even sure who plays in this tournament. I mean, most of the really good players are involved in the NHL. I don't know how many of them were involved for Canada. Team Canada goes down 2-1 at minus 3,000. You had to put 3,000 down to win 100. I don't know what kind of nutbag would do that. I mean, you would always be inclined to take a little sniff on the underdog, as unlikely as it was that Denmark would beat Canada. But minus 3,000 to win 100? Who has $3,000 to win a $100 bill? And if you had the $3,000, would you really want to, increase your bankroll to 3,100 by plunging on that at minus 3,000 to 100? But it turned out to be a monumental upset, kind of like Buster Douglas, Mike Tyson. Never forget, I was covering the NBA All-Star Weekend that happened to be in Miami as that fight was taking place, and they were having the so-called skills competitions there. They had the three-point shooting and the slam dunk the night before, and that was the night the Tyson-Douglas fight took place in Japan. And I'm in the locker room trying to get some interviews after the three-point shooting competition took place, and there was just an absolute air of shock when it was learned that, and this was before everybody got instant results on the internet and on their cell phones. In fact, cell phones didn't even exist back then. I don't think they might have been in that brick fashion where you had to carry a thing that weighed like 40 pounds around and pay $50 a minute for cell phone service. It was clearly a luxury at that time. But once word circulated that Tyson had been knocked out by Buster Douglas, my God, all the way from Magic Johnson to Larry Bird, that's all anybody was talking about. And this upset with Denmark over Canada was sort of in that category. Buster Douglas, a 45-1 underdog. These guys essentially 30-1 as Denmark knocks off Canada in that tournament. So that continues with Denmark and Czechoslovakia. Can they do it again? I don't know. If you missed out on this one, then probably got to the point where you're too late to the party. But yeah, that was kind of like when the little fat man, Andy Ruiz, a little Mexican guy, beat Anthony Joshua. Same kind of thing where you can't imagine the magnitude of this level of upset. And yet, as Jim Lampley said in an interview we did on Bleacher Brothers earlier this week, show called Conversations, it happened. And if you happen to be on the right side of that thing, then you're feeling very fortunate. You'll be able to pay for any amount of meat at the barbecue you're conducting on Memorial Day. We wish you all the luck in the world in all of your bets, but very tempted to take the points tonight with the Indiana Pacers. How they're even bigger underdogs after winning that game than they were going into game number one. Maybe people are thinking that the spark of desperation might be an inspiration for the New York Knicks to put up a better performance. They did play well, and as I said, Indiana, outside of that streak by Neesmith in the fourth quarter and Halliburton's action throughout the game, Siakam wasn't particularly strong. Turner wasn't. You would have to think that they could polish things up and play a better ball game. And if they were able to win game number one outright in overtime, albeit, then you would have to think that they have a chance of being within 6 points of the New York Knicks tonight. All right, good luck with all of your wagers. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you again on Tuesday. And hopefully everybody out there that is a fan of Bury Your Bookie will be walking around with a pocket full of cash. I'm Jeff DeForrest. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you Tuesday with the next edition of Bury Your Bookie.